Nigeria today, we have a very poor tax collection performance, and of course is one of the poorest in the region, with about just 8.3% to GDP. And we are talking of the giant of Africa. So that is very, very poor. And the last, Mr. Howell just, give a figure of about 20 billion US dollars annually being lost to illicit financial flows. Imagine the infrastructure, the services that will provide. The schools, hospitals, name it. The development challenges we have here in Nigeria, the high unemployment rates. How much can $20 billion do? So that is the magnitude of what we are talking about. Because most times when we see illicit financial flows or these tax exemptions, it looks a bit too abstract. But when you begin to break it down into reality, what that means is actually a bit mind-boggling and a bit irritating as well. So we really need to ensure that we also not just raise the awareness of the citizens to understand what this tax financial flow means, illicit financial flow means, but what the implication also is on their own livelihoods, on their own welfare. Because that is basically one of the reasons why many households, are not living in dignity or cannot able to afford, basic requirements for their households. As Oxfam, we've done quite a lot with our partners. This is one of the things that we're doing with our partners, CISLAC, together with other CSOs. We've been able to basically build over 17 Justice Tax Alliance platforms in 17 states. We've been carrying out sensitizations to, in marketplaces, to those that are worst hit by these issues, to understand what it means by fair taxation, because these are the ones that are usually impacted by multiple taxation. That is the reality of those of us in the rural areas. And of course, also we'll continue to work with our CSO partners to build their capacity to be able to advocate fairly on these issues. Lastly, what we would like to recommend, and of course, I'm sure that we'll be able to come out with some rich recommendations here that we'll be able to pass on to the policy makers or those that have the power to make things happen. First of all, we definitely need to increase the progressive nature of our tax collection in a way where the rich pays more and the poor pays less. It's only fair, isn't it? And of course, we need to diversify the economy, shift from oil. That's also a huge potential for us to increase our revenue.
So it was against that context that the African Ministers of Finance established the Mbeki panel at their meeting in 2012. The panel's mandate was to determine the nature and patterns of illicit financial flows, establish the levels, assess the complex implications to Africa's long-term development, raise awareness about the whole phenomenon, and propose policies and mobilize support for practices to reverse such illicit flows. So the understanding of the Mbeki panel, borrowing from the global financial integrity, was to see illicit financial flows as money illegally earned, transferred, or used. The point being that it was not enough that you earned your money legally, say in an economic entity like Nigeria. But if you transferred it out illegally, then you've entered the scope of illicit financial flows. Of course, if the money was earned illegally here and also transported out illegally, also falling within that scope. But if it's also used illegally wherever you take it to, of course, then it's also captured by the whole context of illicit financial flows. So basically, the idea was that you are violating the law in origin, movement, or use. And then, of course, a legal act, again, in one jurisdiction, does not nullify the intent or purpose of hiding money, which is what illicit financial flows are all about. Then the panel spent some time thinking about what exactly are illicit financial flows. And it identified three components. The first component was the commercial component, which interestingly enough was estimated at 65% of illicit financial flows. This included things like transfer pricing undertaken by multinational corporations, trade mispricing, misinvoicing of services and intangibles, and unequal contracts. In other words, contracts that are signed beneath the table, so to speak, in order to enable people to extract resources from African countries and pretend that they are taking out far less than they are actually taking. And so the purpose of IFF, to emphasize again, was hiding wealth. In other words, you're hiding it either from the taxman, you're hiding it from the customs authorities, you're hiding it from the police. Indeed, you're hiding it from society, evading taxes and such like. Second component was, of course, more familiar in general terms. It's about 30%, was the criminal activities such as money laundering, trafficking in people, drugs and arms, smuggling, financial fraud, and the like. So white-collar crime. So those were the criminal component where people are actually committing crimes in order to be able to take those resources out. And their whole purpose again was, of course, taking it out in a way that the law enforcement agencies would not be able to catch up with them. The third component, and this was very interesting in the work of the panel, is that the actual bribes and abuse of office accounted for only 5% of the flows. But in another way, corruption was actually 100% of the flows, because each of the other acts was facilitated by corruption. So the person who enabled you to under-invoice, the person who enabled you to evade taxes, the person who enabled you to smuggle, were all enabling in a corrupt environment. So in one way, the direct losses from corruption, bribery, theft from government coffers was 5%, but in essence, corruption was the oil across all those activities. In looking at the size of illicit financial flows, the panel faced several challenges. It faced several challenges in the sense that, how do you estimate something that is hidden? In other words, the sole purpose of illicit financial flows is to avoid measurement or recording. So how then do you estimate it? But yes, you needed to estimate it again because you wanted to know how much was being lost, the drain of resources on development. You also wanted, to have a sense of how various economic activities were being impacted upon by illicit financial flows. So the estimates vary. Some of the estimates vary because all you could do was to try and look at trade misinvoicing. Some of the estimates varied because all you tried to look at was drugs and crime. Some of the estimates varied because what you were trying to look at was direct theft or corruption.